In this video, I will be unboxing, assembling, and reviewing the Bosch PTS 10 table saw. I decided to try this saw after some bad experiences with other budget table saws. This particular model was purchased in 2017 for about 300 euros, although it does not include the base, which runs another 100 euros or so. My expectations for the saw were fairly low since I'll be comparing it to other budget saws rather than larger, more powerful saws that can cost more than 5 times as much. The PTS 10 is really one of the few table saws commercially available in Europe around this price point. With that said, let's get to the unboxing. Here are all of the pieces that come in the box. Everything was nicely packed away and nothing was damaged in the shipment. There was also a large piece of styrofoam between the motor and the table, which couldn't be removed without disassembling the saw or breaking the styrofoam into pieces. I chose the latter. The base of the saw is plastic, which is fairly flexible but shows no signs of breaking. The bottom plate is also made of plastic and doesn't do much to contain the dust that doesn't pass through the vacuum attachment. This is fairly typical of this type of saw, and at least the dust isn't trapped in an enclosure underneath the saw. The insert on this saw is removed with the tool supplied, and the height can be adjusted on the 4 corners so that it's level with the table. The riving knife supplied is not able to be adjusted so that it can be used for grooves, so it needs to be removed for this type of cut. I may end up modifying it by cutting it just below the height of the blade, which should allow it to be used for all types of cuts. One useful feature is the extendable outfeed table. It only extends the table by about 15 centimeters or so, but that's enough for most cuts done in the small spaces that this saw was designed for. The top of the extension is sloped, so pieces coming out of the saw don't get caught. One of the special features on this saw is the sliding table. This is pretty common on high-end saws in Europe, but in cheaper saws it feels more like a gimmick. However, I was pleasantly surprised. The sliding table has less slack than the miter gauge slot and is adjustable with 3 screws on the side. It feels good to use, although due to the table's size and the placement of the sliding mechanism, its uses are more limited than the more expensive, larger sliding table saws. The fence is definitely one of the weak points of the PTS 10. It locks by pushing the handle down, but since it locks in the back first, there's a lot of play before it settles into its final position. This means that it needs to be measured carefully before each cut, which can be time-consuming. Once it is locked, however, it stays in place and is adjustable in the back if it comes loose. The saw also came with this smaller fence, which is used to cut narrow stock. The right-hand extension is also handy for sheet materials. The extension functions as an auxiliary fence with two positions for cuts from 14 to 25 centimeters and from 22 to 52 centimeters. Like the other fence, there's a lot of play before locking the front and back into position, which means it needs to be carefully measured each time. Personally, I prefer using the circular saw with a guide for this type of work, but it's nice to have the option. The blade height adjustment is similar to other saws in this range. The maximum cut depth is 75 mm at 90 degrees and 63 mm at 45 degrees. The angle adjustment is done by releasing the screw above, then pushing the wheel into the grooves and turning. It can be difficult to do one-handed and isn't terribly accurate, so again, it needs to be carefully measured after each adjustment. Here are a few test cuts using both the miter gauge in the slot and the sliding table. Here's a final cut using the fence and supplied blade. In conclusion, the PTS 10 is a great saw for hobbyist or DIY use. It has its drawbacks like any hobbyist saw, but at this price range it is likely one of the best table saws available in Europe. If you're looking for a more precise, powerful or larger saw, expect to pay at least 4 times as much for any significant improvement in performance. Feel free to ask any further questions about the saw in the comments, or if you already own it, let me know what you think.